Hey guys, it's Jan, and I wanted to share. I'm taking these notes to self. This is my second episode of Notes to Self. As I've said before, I normally take audio notes because writing stuff down can be challenging for me when there's so much to write and there's so little time. So I, a lot of times will take audio notes for myself when I'm for many things, whether that's media or martial arts or anything I'm studying, and just expand upon ideas that are rapidly coming to me that I'm feeling, etc. So right now I'm in the process of going through a lot of things that inspired me as a child, and looking into and as a young artist, and looking into how I feel about those things now. I'm at a new point in my life, and really just revisiting and seeing what I was drawing from them that fueled me, and how that can revisiting them can essentially affect what I'm doing now. Today I'll be going over Seven Samurai from Akira Kurosawa, the classic, Street Fighter comic books, and Road to Perdition, which I do not have the DVD here with me. I just streamed it, but I own the DVD. It's somewhere else. But I'll maybe like flash an image of it online on this video. So this will be short. But starting with Seven Samurai. So Seven Samurai, something that was always in my home as a kid on VHS. And I was never really into it as a kid. I watched it, and it was, it's black and white, and I was like, oh, okay. I was really more so into the kung fu movies that my parents would show me, because they were more action. They were more, those are very, very overtly expressed actions across the board in those kung fu movies. But this one, there's a lot of subtleties here, and it wasn't until I think college that when I was in film school, that I really said to myself, I'm going to sit down and make myself watch this, because I was really studying Kurosawa and the framing. My father was very adamant about me looking into Japanese films for framing, for composition of the frame. And so when I saw Seven Samurai, I felt like I found my favorite movie of all time. And that's not to say, or should I say favorite film of all time. Sometimes I feel like there's a difference between film and movies. Movies are more just entertainment, and film has a lot of depth to it. That's, they're all kind of the same, but that's how I used to organize them in my mind. I'm like, this is my favorite film of all time. So what I'm getting at here is that Seven Samurai, a 3-hour epic with an intermission, which I watched this past weekend, it's spectacular. I highly recommend checking it out. And the reason, what I've drawn from it, and what I continue to draw from it, again, because I was wondering, is this still going to be my favorite film? If you saw the last episode, I reviewed John Woo's The Killer, which was literally the movie that made me want to be a director. I didn't know what a director was until I saw that. And I realized that film had essentially connected with a type of sadness and anger that I had inside as a kid, that I wasn't cognizant of until now. And when I watched that movie, I'm like, oh God, why did I ever like this? And I know why, but it's still the movie that made me want to be a director, but I wouldn't put it in my top 3 like I used to, simply because I saw it from a different perspective now. So I was wondering if this was going to be my favorite film. Saw it this weekend, and I'm confirmed that it's still my favorite film. And the reason why is because of the raw honesty of the performances. One of the reasons is the raw honesty of the performances, and the writing. And I'll say it's really amazing that all of the characters in this film essentially are, even the deception is honest. So it's rather than saying one thing and meaning another, people are saying exactly what they mean all the time in this film. Their body language, they're not hiding anything at all. So when the deception is there, it's very clear. Like, I'm going to do this because of, these feelings, and I'm going to hide something. But there's a difference between not saying everything and lying. And to be able to just simply, say what they're going to say or not say, but never lying. There's no lying in this film, and it's amazing. And there's one character trait that you'll see that is a deception, but that's another thing. I'm telling you specifically about the performances. and the writing. It's just pretty amazing stuff, and I personally strive in my life to say what I mean and mean what I say, and to follow through in many different ways. So this is a slow film, I'll say that. And what I mean by that is that, you know, we're in a different attention economy now. So from the standpoint of if you're looking for something to come at you and meet you, this is not the kind of filmmaking that's going to meet you. You have to meet it. And, you know, I was watching with my partner this past weekend, and just, you know, you have to really be ready to watch a film like this. And then not just Seven Samurai, but many of the classic films. I still, you know, say that Charlie Chaplin is the most modern thing that I'm watching right now, because of how engaging that is. He was a very different mind, and his stuff is very much formatted almost like social media today. A lot of his content, but something like Seven Samurai, you have to sit there. You're observing life unfolding. And another thing that I want to talk about this, on this particular narrative is just how long, because of the attention economy, the difference in the attention economy of the day, where you're sitting there and you're spending time with characters, so much time watching their body fully react to a moment, an idea. You get to know them so well that you don't even need close-ups. There aren't many close-ups in this film. You don't need to have a close-up or even a medium shot or even an American shot, which is head to feet. Sometimes you'll have something that's a long shot, you know, much farther back, and you'll know which characters are who's who, because of the body language, because of it's just amazing. And over the course of 3 hours, you become so intimately connected to these characters. And that's something that I find only happens in great films. And now that we're in the age of the cinematic universe, where essentially films are episodic, serialized storytelling, the investment, or even binge watching, the investment is normally longer on our part as an audience. Not so much on me, because I do my best not to watch a lot of stuff. Don't watch most shows or anything like that. But what I'm getting at is that the amount of time that one is investing, that an audience member could be investing in a particular film or series of content, is going to be longer to get the same effect that you're getting in here, which is the character intimacy. And it's because of less cutting, more emphasis on performance, more emphasis on the reality of the honesty of what's happening in with these characters, and just you getting it and feeling it. It's awesome. So I can't stress this film enough. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's amazing. The composition, the frame is amazing. The frames are amazing. The layout, how land is, you really get a sense of the setting and where things are spatially. You really get a sense of space in this, of the town that is a major part of the story. And of course, if you don't know, Seven Samurai, it has been consistently over and over again remade, whether it's the Magnificent Seven, which I never really cared to watch. But there was a remake with like Denzel Washington and a bunch of other people a few years ago, which I also did not watch. But Samurai 7, which I'll eventually do a notes to self episode on, which is an amazing anime. It's based on this mind-blowing stuff. And also what connected to inspiring a rewatch of this was an episode of The Mandalorian, which is, I think, episode 3 or 4. I think it's 4. With where the Gina Carano character is introduced. That's essentially a retelling of the Seven Samurai, and watch Seven Samurai. That's all I'll say. Okay, so moving on to the Street Fighter comics. So these Street Fighter comics are a huge part of my creative development. And this is Street Fighter 4, which I had only read bits and pieces of years ago. But I started reading. I read the whole thing. Let's just say the 4-issue miniseries, the 4-issue story arc here, and I'll just kind of go through these wonderful covers, and there's all these variant covers as well. But the cool thing about Street Fighter, as a whole, to me is how expansive the world is. It's a massive narrative, and that's one of the challenges of it, is because there's really, the definitive narrative of Street Fighter is arguable, and what Udon, the folks at Udon, as you can see that their logo there, have done for years, starting with the first Street Fighter, which I'm rereading now, which I'll also do another little piece on. But I wanted to talk about this because of how important this stuff is in terms of it was super important for me in terms of developing my sense of comic book action. Even though I grew up in comics, I really didn't get it was this series that really made me look at action differently in comics, and how action is displayed on panel to panel. And I think now, especially for filmmakers that are really taking vertical cinema to heart, like reading comics is one of the most important things you can do right now, because vertical cinema is it's a different frame. It's not widescreen, and it's not 4:3. I was trained in 4:3 on 16mm reversal. So this is and just another opportunity to play with a new layout. And the comic book, finally, because of vertical cinema, the comic book frames are now very much achievable. So I'm looking at this kind of stuff very intensely. I'll say that I have been and can be very competitive, and looking at Street Fighter comics reminded me of wanting to do action better than they were doing it in the comic book form. So when we put out our first issue of Justice for Hire, the comics, all of that thinking, our competitiveness with my team's competitiveness, my action choreography team, and our love for Street Fighter, pushed us to go into extreme detail in martial arts, body mechanics, etc. So, check out the Justice for Hire comics. And there's something, if you look at the Instagram page right now, there's something happening over there that you might be interested in. So yeah, this is fun. It's great stuff. I highly recommend it. And my note to self here is just the consistent reminder on all the amazing things that are happening within this frame, within all of these frames of how they're organizing information vertically. So, I also personally want to make a Street Fighter series at one point. It's one of the few properties that I personally feel very connected to, that actually I want to help in other forms of media. So I don't think that Street Fighter has really been done as well as it can be, as beautifully as it can be. Even though the Machinima feature film, directed by his name escapes me, but I have a lot of respect for the director, who was a stunt guy. He and his team put out a really cool Street Fighter series for Machinima a few years ago, which has been repackaged as a feature film. So I think it's called Street Fighter Resurrection. Check that out if you haven't seen it, because what they do with choreography there is in terms of honoring the Street Fighter legacy, it's pretty phenomenal. It's incredibly admirable. And so the final thing I want to talk about is Road to Perdition, and I'll maybe flash something on screen for that. But Road to Perdition is based on, heavily inspired by something called Lone Wolf and Cub, and that's one of my father's favorite comic books, mangas, I should say. And so Lone Wolf and Cub, if you watch The Mandalorian, heavily inspired by Lone Wolf and Cub. It's been a story that's been retold very often of a samurai caring for a child on the road. So it's an amazing story. Road to Perdition blew my mind when I saw it. Sam Mendes film. I think it's the last film from Conrad Hall, and there's a father-son Conrad Hall, so the father, senior. I think it's Conrad L. Hall, cinematographer. Amazing cinematography. And it's when I saw it in college, to me, it immediately became the best Tom Hanks movie. And the reason I'm doing this note to self is obviously there's amazing framing in it. There's a cleanliness to the frames, even though the world it's a dirty world. There's a cleanliness to the frames. As a matter of fact, I sat in, as a side note, on a on a talk with the director of Bonnie and Clyde, which I'm about to rewatch as well, which is also brilliant, which is set in the same era as I think it's the 20s of Road to Perdition. And that director was very upset with the look and cleanliness of the era Chicago in that era. So he had some harsh criticisms, and which was really amazing for me to watch a director I really respect have who, from a film I love, Bonnie and Clyde, have an issue with a film that I also love, but from a director I really respect, Sam Mendes and Road to Perdition. So that was interesting. But Road to Perdition, one of the cool things about it, and one of the challenges I had with it, the cool thing is Tom Hanks saying hardly anything. It's one of the best Tom Hanks performances because of the fact that he says so little. And Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise, Denzel Washington, Jackie Chan, Will Smith, all of these icons have a challenge, and the challenge is that their status. They make Will Smith makes Will Smith movies. Tom Cruise makes Tom Cruise movies. Tom Hanks makes Tom Hanks movies. Jackie Chan makes Jackie Chan movies. So the challenge with being in that position is that you become less of people expect something from you, and a lot of times it's Will Smith playing Will Smith in a movie. It doesn't feel like a different character because he's so much Will Smith, and you become more of an entertainment icon rather than the actor. So to see Tom Hanks in a role where he was consistently, everything is toned down that about Tom Hanks, and you forget it's him. You just find this gravitas of screen presence, and it's just amazing. And it's a father-son story, and it's a father that didn't really know his son, and how they learn about each other, and the love that grows, and the challenges that the son goes through, essentially seeing his family get killed, his mother and his brother. It's just like amazing stuff. It's also a reminder for me that while there's a lot of inspiration I draw from it, and I love finality. I love when films end and stories end, rather than consistently being episodic. So it's a great example of just packaging something, and it reminds me of how wonderful it could be if you just have a very clear beginning, middle, and end of your story. So I highly recommend checking out Road to Perdition, and that's it. I was again, these notes to self for me are things that I normally would be saying to myself on an audio recorder, but just decided to start shooting some video and sharing them. So once again, that's Seven Samurais, the Street Fighter comic. Get any of them, the Street Fighter comics, if you like that game, if you like Street Fighter as a narrative. And I'll talk more about Street Fighter on another episode, because there's a lot of criticism I actually have about Street Fighter and what I'm reminded of, not just inspired of, but what I'm reminded of, and how more optimized ways to build out massive character storytelling. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you soon.